The town of Elmridge basked in a deceptive calmness, a place where people exchanged pleasantries with hollow smiles, and secrets thrived beneath manicured lawns. Among them was Liana Hart, a young woman with eyes like silent storms and a presence that used to shimmer like sunlight on glass. Years ago, she had been the heartbeat of this place, graceful, kind, and promising. But Elmridge was not kind to those who bloomed too brightly. At 20, she had trusted too easily, especially Damon Ellsworth, the charming heir of the most influential family in town. Their love had been swift and intoxicating, a fire that consumed her completely. But it was all a ruse. Damon never truly loved her. She had been a pawn, used to distract from his own scandals and to provide a scapegoat for a corporate fraud he orchestrated. When the investigation began, Damon fabricated evidence pointing toward Liana. Her world crumbled, her reputation tarnished, her scholarship revoked, her family humiliated. While she stood in court, her name dragged through dirt, Damon sat expressionless, his hand in his pocket, watching her fall with detached curiosity. No one questioned his innocence, and no one listened to her pleas. She vanished soon after, swallowed by the shadows of disgrace, while Damon's life carried on. Unmarred, powerful, untouchable. But what no one knew was that Liana did not vanish to disappear. She vanished to transform. She moved to a distant city, changed her name, and studied under the greatest minds in cybersecurity and corporate law. She became someone no one in Elmridge would recognize, refined, brilliant, and veiled in elegance. For 5 years she plotted, not with wrath, but with precision. Revenge to her was not about screaming or bloodshed. It was about poetry, justice delivered in silence. And now she was ready. She returned under a new identity, Evelyn Rhodes, cloaked in wealth and charm, buying out a tech firm that just so happened to have the controlling interest in Ellsworth Enterprises. She arrived in Elmridge for a merger discussion, welcomed like royalty. Damon, now a rising star in politics, met Evelyn with flirtatious curiosity, unaware of the fire beneath her velvet voice. He didn't recognize Liana. His memory never retained those he destroyed. But she remembered everything. The way his eyes sparkled when he lied. The tilt of his smile when he manipulated. Over dinner, he confessed ambitions of becoming governor, asking Evelyn if she'd like to be his partner in reshaping the world. Liana smiled, sipping her wine. She would reshape something far more intimate, his legacy. Damon's charm hadn't dulled with time, but Liana, or Evelyn, as he knew her now, had mastered the art of indifference, the ability to laugh at his jokes without flinching, to let his gaze linger without betraying the volcano that rumbled beneath her composed surface. She began inserting herself into his world, piece by piece, pretending to be enthralled by his vision, asking questions that stroked his ego, while slowly infiltrating every crevice of his empire. She gathered allies silently, posing as a potential investor, with an interest in innovation and ethics. Words that disarmed his greedy instincts. He gave her access to confidential documents, even inviting her into closed-door meetings under the guise of partnership. And all the while, she documented, recorded, and mirrored everything. She discovered how he falsified campaign donations, bribed local officials, even buried environmental violations by paying off regulators. His corruption ran deeper than she expected, and it excited her, because the higher he had climbed, the harder he would fall. Behind the scenes, Liana reconnected with Mason Kane, an old classmate who had once admired her brilliance from afar. He had become a reputable journalist, And though he didn't recognize Evelyn at first, something about her felt familiar. When she revealed her identity to him, under an oath of secrecy, Mason was shaken. By the truth, by her pain, and by her strength, he offered his help without hesitation. Together, they created a dossier so damning it could dismantle Damon's life 10 times over. But Liana didn't just want exposure. She wanted Damon to watch his world decay from within, piece by piece, as helplessly as she had watched hers burn. So she began laying traps. Small leaks to the media, anonymous tips, to watchdog groups, whispers among investors. Slowly, the pressure began to build. Board members grew restless. Journalists sniffed around his financials. His carefully curated image started to show cracks, but Liana remained his confidant, his elegant shadow, always at his side, always feeding him just enough hope to make the fall more painful. And when Damon, desperate for a way out, asked her to help him fix things, she agreed. With a gleam in her eyes that he mistook for devotion, she offered to create a digital shell company that would make it look like foreign investors were backing his clean energy initiative. In reality, she built a trap that rerouted illicit funds through the fake entity and exposed every illicit transaction tied to his name. The final nail was a gala. Damon announced a major political move. There, surrounded by cameras, supporters, and dignitaries, Liana wore black velvet and a sapphire pendant, like royalty attending a coronation. But it was no coronation. It was a funeral for his ambitions. Just before his speech, she leaned in, her voice low and lethal, and whispered, "Do you remember, Liana Hart?" Damon froze, confusion flickering in his eyes. And then, realization dawned, not all at once, but like a sun eclipsed by sudden darkness. She smiled and stepped back into the crowd, just as the screens behind him lit up. Not with his campaign ad, but with the entire dossier she and Mason had built. The crowd gasped. Reporters surged forward. And Damon, once untouchable, stood, paralyzed in a hurricane of his own making. The room descended into chaos as the truth unfurled on the massive screens. Images of forged signatures, falsified donation records, and clips of whistleblowers recounting Damon's schemes played in a relentless loop. The murmurs of admiration for Damon turned into whispers of outrage, then into loud cries for accountability. Damon stood frozen on stage, his expression a mix of disbelief and desperation. He stumbled through a half-hearted denial, but the weight of the evidence rendered his words hollow. Liana, watching from the edge of the room, allowed herself a moment to savor the spectacle. Yet this was far from over. Damon's downfall would not be quick. It would be slow, agonizing, and deliberate. By the time security escorted him out of the gala, the media frenzy had grown uncontrollable, with journalists hounding him for answers. Behind the scenes, Liana activated the next phase of her plan. Using the shell company she had created, she leaked details of Damon's international ties, painting a picture of a politician entangled in foreign bribery and fraud. Regulatory agencies pounced, freezing his assets and launching investigations that unraveled his empire further. Investors abandoned him, his allies distanced themselves, and his public approval plummeted to depths he had never thought possible. Damon tried to fight back, attempting to smear Liana's name in a desperate bid to regain control, but she was untouchable. As Evelyn Rhodes, she had built an impeccable reputation, and Damon had no proof of her involvement. Behind the scenes, Mason's articles exposed every new revelation with meticulous precision, leaving no stone unturned. Each day brought new headlines. each one a dagger in Damon's crumbling image. Meanwhile, Liana reached out to those Damon had wronged over the years. Employees he had exploited, families he had ruined, communities he had neglected. She gave them a voice, amplifying their stories in the media and ensuring that Damon's name became synonymous with betrayal and greed. But Liana wasn't just interested in destroying Damon's career. She wanted to dismantle the very foundation of his arrogance. So she turned her attention to the Ellsworth family legacy. Quietly, she acquired shares in companies tied to the Ellsworths' wealth, rerouting profits into charities and social programs aimed at rebuilding the lives Damon had destroyed. By the time Damon realized what was happening, it was too late. His family's fortune had been hollowed out, their influence reduced to whispers of what it once was. One night, Damon showed up at Liana's doorstep, his face pale, his suit disheveled. He had figured it out, finally, though too late to stop her. "You ruined me," he spat, his voice trembling with fury and disbelief. Liana stood in the doorway, unflinching. "No, Damon," she replied, her tone calm and cutting. "You ruined yourself. I just helped you see it." She closed the door in his face, leaving him to the silence of his defeat, a man undone by the very shadows he had cast. The weeks that followed were the final unraveling. Damon Ellsworth was indicted on multiple charges: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, all supported by overwhelming evidence meticulously orchestrated by Liana. He pled not guilty, of course, clinging to the last scraps of the illusion he had lived in for years. But the courtroom was no longer his stage. It was hers. Mason's articles were entered into evidence, and witnesses she had protected now stood tall, telling their stories with power and pride. The very town that once turned its back on Liana now watched with solemn recognition, realizing the price of their silence, their complicity. Damon's conviction came swiftly, a unanimous verdict that shattered the remnants of his former life. As he was led away in handcuffs, cameras flashed not in sympathy, but in vindication, and Liana, Evelyn, did not attend the sentencing. She didn't need to. Her victory was not in his punishment, but in her transformation. She had reclaimed her narrative, reshaped her pain into purpose, and ensured that no one else would suffer the way she had. She returned once more to Elmridge, this time not in disguise, but as herself. She walked through the town square where whispers used to follow her, and now those same voices offered apologies, admiration, and awe. But Liana didn't stay. Her revenge was complete, not in rage, but in restoration. She left Elmridge with quiet grace, choosing not to dwell in the ashes of what had been burned, but to rise into the future she had built with her own fire. On the train that carried her away, she stared out the window at the passing trees, the blurred lights, and the sky opening wide. Mason sat across from her, notebook in hand, watching her not as a victim, but as a survivor who had rewritten the ending. "What now?" he asked softly. Liana turned to him, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Now I live." Her eyes held no more pain, only power, and with the wind at her back and the past behind her, she finally breathed, not with vengeance but with victory.